Hello, everyone. It's George Howard, and welcome back to the Foxhole, where we're going to unravel some more mysteries in advance of the Cosmic Summit 2024, which is coming up June 15th, 16th, and 17th, and tickets are selling quickly. We're joined by a good lineup today. We did have three. We might have a third jump in, but right now we've got the Beauty and the Beast. We've got Mr. Scott Wolter, who spoke last year.
Talk about Haley like that.
Don't talk about Haley like that, exactly, man. Oh shit! No, we got the Beauty and the Beast. You take your pick. Which is which, folks? But you've probably seen Scott Wolter. He was host of the television series America on Earth for several years, and became justifiably popular because he came over at it from a forensic geologist standpoint and really going to the lab and seeing what modern techniques can tell us about ancient disputed discoveries. A lot of the time, Scott, a lot of this stuff was out there for years, and you went back, readdressed it, and gave us a new interpretation of it, some positive, some negative to its validity.
That's right.
But that's all right. He's got a new book coming out, and we're going to talk about that today. That's called Oak Island Knights Templar and the Holy Grail, which are his subjects. And then he has with him a new friend of mine as well that I met when I met Scott, but she was unable to speak at the Cosmic Summit 2024. We all met out in Sedona last year in April, and that's Mrs. Hayley, Miss Hayley Ramsey. How you doing, Hayley?
Mrs. Hayley?
I know.
You never told me.
Good for you. You are a miss. Well, these days you don't want to say miss. You feel like you're saying something kind of politically incorrect. I don't know. This is Hayley Ramsey, folks. You can tell she's a woman. She doesn't need, what, a pronoun? Oh, gosh. And she has just written a book, and that's called The Bringer of Life, A Cosmic History of the Divine Feminine. I've read some. My wife has read more, and it's a terrific book, and she's going to tell us about it today, and also tell us about it at the Cosmic Summit, because she's speaking this year. Yeah. So, hey, guys, it's good to see you. The Foxhole, this is probably episode 6 or 7, I guess. So thanks for your patience with me. I'm a new podcaster. But I'm going to hang in there, man. I ain't going anywhere with this platform. I kind of enjoy it. It's a little stressful every time, and I appreciate y'all taking some time out of your Sunday to join me here. You're at Minnesota, right?
Yes, we are, and we're excited to be here. And as soon as this is over, Haley is taking us to a winery, and we're going to have a little wine tonight and pizza, right?
Yes. That's the important dinner plans, George, I was telling you about.
We're going to go see, I think have dinner with my father-in-law. So I got a little something to do after this too, including having a couple of beers.
Yeah.
We're down at the coast, which actually makes my recording a little bit unusual. But Scott, I've been accused by a good friend of mine. He says, you need to get off to a quicker start. Hit them with the good stuff first, and then they'll stick with you the rest of the time. And you're supposed to do that in the first 5 seconds, and I've already missed that by 10 or 20. But hey, man, I think a good place to start with you. I want you to tell us, what are the Cremona documents? What's the old
Cremona
history
documents? Cremona.
Yes.
You're ready for that?
Carol, what is the name? I've read the book.
It's Cremona.
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 I usually don't mispronounce things, and I know better. Cremona. Corona just would be, that's because of the virus. That word is stuck in our head. The Cremona docs. And what is their importance? I kind of want their old history and kind of their new history, because you're kind of doing this stuff live now. That's the interesting thing. We've got a couple other speakers who are doing that, but I think you exemplify best somebody who is in mid-hunt, and they're going to come and tell us what they're finding. So you pick up.
Yeah, we are in the midst of an incredible years-long investigation into the truth about what happened to the ideological and the biological descendants of the Atlanteans that were a high culture that existed prior to a very catastrophic event. You may have heard of it, George. It's called the Younger Dryas. Are you familiar with that?
I traffic in such heresies. Yes, I've come across it.
Well, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've come across it. Yeah, and that's not speculation anymore, man. That's data, right? And then what we got to do is fill in the history before and after it, because we know it changed history. And that's generally ignored because the Younger Dryas impact and accepted. So tell us, what's the connection to the Templars and
Well,
and your story
in
and
a
your book.
nutshell, and before we get done, we also have to promote the new series that's currently airing that my Masonic brother, Tim Hogan, who,
Yeah,
excuse me, hopefully will be showing up any time here. But he
yeah,
and I filmed last summer that's currently airing right now called Mysteries of the Knights Templar. And one of the
yeah.
things that we are now ready to talk about is the Atlantean culture that existed prior to this catastrophic event that had a worldwide network of people, of ideology, of the ability to communicate. And I think what we're going to see as time goes on, hopefully in our lifetimes, is that just about all of these megalithic structures, things like the pyramids that we see in Egypt, in Central America, South America, in North America, in Europe, literally all over the world, are evidenced of this high culture that existed previously. And as these things are being studied, what's happening is archaeologists and geologists, I'm a geologist, of course, and so we
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that the geological aspects are covered here. But what they're finding out is they're pushing back the age of these things farther and farther and farther. They're getting older and older, and they are now at a tipping point where we realize that they existed before this catastrophic event. And we see evidence of these at all of these sites around the world, like vitrified glass and other things. But what's happening now is people are just starting to understand that there was a major event that happened. Some people believe it was a series of meteorite impacts, a meteorite shower, if you will, that traveled throughout the universe that the Atlanteans knew was coming. And so they prepared for it. Evidence of that you can find at Gobekli Tepe, where they actually covered up this pre-existing astronomical observatory, which would probably be one of the places where they were studying the heavens and understood that this cataclysm was coming. So the Atlanteans prepared for it. They basically hid their knowledge, their documents, their relics, their remains, their technology, artifacts. All of this was hidden.
Now, Scott, wait, let
Oh,
me
wait.
clarify. For those that aren't
Mm.
familiar, when we say Atlanteans, we are not referring to a race of people, right?
Well, I'm not sure about that. It may have been multiracial, but it was a culture that
It was a culture, right?
that was connected worldwide. Yes. So I think that's a good. I mean, that's what our understanding is right now. But what happened was they passed down this knowledge after of the before the cataclysm, and that knowledge was passed down through ideological and biological ancestors, or I should say, descendants from the ancestors, and eventually around the year 1100. The descendants of these Atlanteans formed the Knights Templar, and they mounted their crusades. They aligned with the Catholic Church, pretending to be Catholic, but they were no such thing. And the leadership eventually captured Jerusalem to establish a base of operations so they could go in that region of the Middle East and to the Near East and round up this knowledge, all these things that the Atlanteans had left for them, with the ultimate goal of establishing a new Jerusalem, a new Atlantis. In some of the documents that we have, the Cremona document,
Thank you.
they also called it the Free Templar State. And really, what that is now today is the United States of America. So this is really a brief synopsis of what the storyline is. And people did not understand the Atlantean connection. They didn't understand this cataclysm. And now it's starting to be looked at, and it fits with the evidence that's been out there for a long time. But the whole story was not put together really until now. So
Man,
that's the
I
brief
mean,
background.
yeah, no, and that's awesome. And I think people, particularly who've went to the Cosmic Summit last year, have been looking into it, can see how that's pretty much right up our alley, right?
Yeah.
And what happened? You joined the cast, if you will, kind of late last year, and I didn't get a chance to kind of introduce it properly. I had some people, I guess some of them weren't as schooled on your work as they were, say, on Randall's, even though y'all overlay a significant amount. And say, well, they're saying, well, isn't Templars kind of a side subject? I said, no. The Templars are the Western esoteric tradition that remembers a precursor civilization,
Absolutely.
and has always has always been suspected to have held the ancient technologies and all the other things we're talking about. But what it is, it's the Western tradition. These traditions are Indian. These traditions are Indonesian. These traditions are Hopi. These traditions are Maya. And this is just the Northern European version of that knowledge. And the Templars were no different, probably out of respect to how well they understood some of these things than some people in the Far East and the Near East and the Middle East at the same time, right? That a
That's
lot of
true.
people had access to this stuff around the world, but the Western it's part of the Western Christian tradition as well, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well,
Because I think
the other thing that's important to keep in mind here is that we're talking about an ancient ideology as well that really has been suppressed by Christianity, and that is
yeah,
respect and veneration of the sacred feminine. And who better to talk about that than the sacred feminine right here? So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how this ties in with this whole story.
Well, as Scott was talking about the Knights Templar,
yeah,
they secretly revered the sacred feminine through
yeah,
the Christian goddess who would have been the Virgin Mary. She was equated to the Queen of Heaven, who was Ishtar in ancient cultures, Inanna, the planet Venus, Isis. And
right,
going back to talking about religious icons as well as catastrophic events, we've been taught that there will be a second coming of Christ, right? At the next
mm-hmm,
catastrophic event, at the end times, let's say. And the second coming of Christ I have found in traditions in Scotland, in the Western Isles of Scotland. This is down in the Western Isles of Scotland. I was digging through some of the archives online that are lesser
yeah,
known and found that this priest, this Hebridean priest from the Hebridean Isles, had told this researcher back in the 19th century, early 19th century, that in fact there was a prophecy that was passed down from the priests out there, and they talked about how on the Isle of Iona, Christ shall come again, but Christ shall come in the end times. And this is when
yeah,
peace will come again on earth, but Christ shall be born as a woman. And this is when
huh,
peace will come again on earth. And I found that really interesting. But this is not a prophecy that's talked about much anywhere
no,
else in Scotland or in the UK or in the world. But it's similar also in the Americas because we have the prophecy of the white buffalo calf woman, the Lakota.
mm-hmm,
They talk about when
mm-hmm.
white buffalo calf woman returns, we'll have peace again. So there's
That's a long,
similar
yeah, that's a
stories all
long
around the
way from
world.
Germany and the Baltics to be sharing the same stories.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
right.
And Scott, you've seen that. You've actually been with indigenous tribes in the U.S. that were practicing the same rites that you've
Oh, yeah.
practiced in
Yeah.
Freemasonry and Templar studies, right?
Well, absolutely. And that's something that occurred to me early on when I was studying the Kensington runestone, and the rock told me that it was old and therefore authentic. And so at that point, I knew that somebody carved it. They came from some place over in Europe and they came over to North America for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that dawned on me right away was, well, if they made their way to what is now the center of the continent in Minnesota now, wouldn't they have interacted with the indigenous people? I mean, they would have had to. And I can't believe that they would have fought their way to Kensington. I'm sure they could have
Mm-hmm.
handled themselves for a while, but back at that time, starting in the late 12th century, there's no way they would have been able to do that. So what was that interaction? What was that dynamic like between the indigenous people and the Templars and then the fugitive order of the Templars after the put down in 1307? And so I reached out to the indigenous people, and it turns out they know all about the Templars, who they call their blood brothers. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that they got along and interacted was through ritual, Masonic ritual, Templar rituals, and intermarriage. So that
Mm-hmm.
allowed them to go all over both North and South America and pretty much do whatever they want because they were bonded deeply with the indigenous people, and it's just amazing.
The indigenous
That
people basically
So
had a
cool.
deep reverence for the feminine, as did the Knights
Mhm.
Templar. So this is one of the
Yep.
things that bonded them. Now, one of the things that I found in my research between Freemasonry, the Knights Templar, and the Indigenous people was upon one of my visits to a ceremony that was Lakota. I was attending
Mm-hmm.
Sweat Lodge, and they have an altar, and the altar is part of what's called the umbilical cord of the lodge. Essentially, there's
Mm-hmm.
crystal stones that attach it to the sweat lodge itself, which is the allegorical womb. We crawl in on all fours. We go into the womb to be
Sure.
born again. And the whole reason that men started the sweat lodge was because they wanted to be like women. Women would go into what they called moon huts to bleed unto the earth, during their
Mm-hmm.
moon time each month. And this way they could purify themselves and have a union with the earth. And this was a very deeply purifying time for them. This was a time they bonded with the earth. And
Spiritual as well.
yes, and this is a time of great wisdom, great medicine. And that's why they weren't allowed to be near any medicine man. And this is why in today's world, if you're having your moon time, you're not allowed to be near any ceremonies or be near a medicine man. It's not for lack of being dirty or unclean. It's because you're so powerful, you can hinder the medicine man's medicine. So, because the men wanted to be like the women and have the same wisdom and purify themselves and have this bond with Mother Earth, they started going to sweat. This is why women did not originally go to sweat, and in some very traditional circles, women do not go to sweat still today. But like in the circles that I participate in, women go into sweat. So when I attended Sweat Lodge, and I noticed this, I learned from my auntie that was leading Sweat Lodge that the leader of the Sweat Lodge can actually cross that umbilical cord, and everybody else must go around it. And I found this really interesting. And I was talking to Scott about this, and he had mentioned to me, he had said something to me about how in the lodge that only the master of the lodge can pass between the altar, which has the three
lesser lights,
and
the three greater lights
as
too.
well. And so only the master can pass between the altar and the east. Everybody else must go around it. And it's that stream of wisdom that flows from the altar, and wisdom and esoteric sex is very much feminine. And so because of that stream of wisdom that flows, could that be the umbilical cord of the lodge, just like in a sweat lodge? It's very similar, and I can't help but wonder if there's a connection between that tradition and Freemasonry and in the Native American sweat lodge.
Beckett, what you thinking, man?
It sounds very, very similar to a Mayan tradition called I believe it's Tezmazcal, if you're familiar with this, but there's a Mayan tradition. Is it similar? Is the practice and ritual similar?
Yes, it is.
I think it is. And it's kind of funny because, when we have new Masons that are raised and then become, part of our meetings, and we open up in lodge. Now you can cross in front of the master and the altar when we're, closed, when the lodge is closed. But when it's open, one of the things that guys will try to do is to get the newbies to cross that line. And of course, give them crap for doing that, because that's not something they're supposed to do. But even though today it's sort of a fun thing, it's also a very old tradition that has to connect with this indigenous tradition. This is not a coincidence at all, because everything else that we do within our rituals, there's parallels with the indigenous people. I actually wrote about these parallels in one of my books called Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers. And this was before I was a Freemason. And I studied this, and I listed the things that I had seen when I was talking to the indigenous people and participating in sweats as well. And then I looked at Masonic ritual, and I just found it fascinating. And I got to the point where I just said, damn it, screw this. I'm going to become a Freemason. I want to learn the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
And let's just say I wasn't disappointed.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I know that's how your journey started, right? You were not a Freemason. You were researching it. You became one of the world's greatest experts from the outside on the order, and then kind of felt a calling to go ahead and join, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And, I met a lot of, something was funny. When I first started giving my lectures on the Kensington runestone, this is going back in the early 2000s. There was a guy that showed up at my lectures, and he would always sit in the back, and he had a long gray beard. He had long hair and a ponytail, and he was wearing glasses. He's a big, tall guy. And one time I went up to him. I saw him for like the second or third time, and I said, "My name is Scott. What's your name?" He said, "My name is Mark." And I said, "This is like the third lecture you've been to. I mean, aren't you getting tired of hearing me talk?" And he goes,
Yeah.
he laughed and he said, "Well, kind of, but." And then I said, "Wait a minute. Are you a Freemason?" And he said, "Yes, I am." Turns out he's a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. He's a Knights Templar. He's a lot of things. And Mark and I have become very good friends, of course. And he was one of the guys that he had heard about me in this research and talking about the Templars. And I was just starting to move into the world of Freemasonry. And they heard about it. And he was there. And he didn't recruit me. He didn't say, "We'd love to have you join." He just answered my questions.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I was invited to speak at lodges. And it just happened organically. And I'm really glad that it did, because I've learned
my two best neighbors here at the beach, went out with them the other day. Both of them are Masons, and they play it pretty cool. They aren't out rounding up people to join up. They don't really bring it up unless they speak of it, but they put a lot of time into it.
Yeah.
Definitely. And they love it. It's just been very valuable for Hayley. How'd you get into this stuff? When did you first come across the Knights Templar? What was your path to all of this esoteric knowledge?
That's a really interesting question. It kind of started, I was studying archaeology initially, which I got out of the world of academia after kind of a strange path. And it was just very political. I fell in love with the history of the Grail legends. Actually, from the time I was a child, I had this obsession with. And
you were reading King Arthur and whatnot. King Arthur was a important character to you.
My favorite movie was The Sword of the Stone. So I think from the time I was a child, I always kind of had this interest in the legends of King Arthur, the legends of the Holy Grail, that sort of stuff. I think that we're always in some way drawn to certain material and subject matter. And so I think, and by the time I was in college, I started reading material that was related to like the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And when I started reading that, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of symbolism and a lot more out here that the church doesn't want us to know. And when I started reading the Gnostic Gospels and like the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the Gospels that have been obviously pushed out of the Bible that the church uses today, I thought, whoa, there's a whole nother narrative. There's so many stories and so many people, so many things that happen that the church doesn't want us to know about. Why is that? And I think once I started deep diving into who really was Jesus, who really was Mary Magdalene, what really was the Holy Grail, did Jesus get married and have kids? Then I started going through the symbolism, and the esoteric symbols started to make sense. And I started to wonder, who were the Knights Templar? And all of it just went hand in hand. I guess all at once, it just all started to make sense to me. And the more I started looking into it, the more it all was just like putting little bits of puzzle pieces together one by one. And then the Sacred Feminine came around, and I remember standing. I was 18, and I was in a church. Or no, I was 19, and I was in a church at Chartres Cathedral, and I was with David Childress from Ancient Aliens, actually, and his wife.
Wow!
Jennifer.
So you were already traveling and touring when you were 18 or 19.
So I had gone with them. They were like my mentors. They never had kids, and so they kind of adopted me, and I went everywhere with them. And so we were around Chartres Cathedral, and I was really into the symbolism of the Sacred Feminine, and I really obsessed on that part of the Knights Templar. I really just felt like this was a really important part, and this was understanding a lot of these ancient stories and the Holy Grail especially. And so as we were walking around Chartres Cathedral, I was talking to David, and I was running around excitedly pointing out, David, this is a symbol of the Sacred Feminine. This is a symbol of the goddess, of the woman. And David just looks at me and he goes, Hayley, you should write a book about this. And I said, well, who's going to publish it? They're publishers. So, and as soon as we left the cathedral, I started writing an outline in the bus that day. And it was from there on, I got typing up my book, and it was just published finally last year. It was obviously years in the making, and 5 years in the making. Was published when I was 23. And I actually met Scott because I reached out to him initially to write the foreword to the book. And so that's how we had initially gotten connected. And when I was writing the book, it took me on such a larger journey than just the Sacred Feminine, of course, because I was really deep diving into the history of the tale of the feminine and ancient civilizations, even going back to the story of Adam and Eve. That was a whole massive cover-up over what really happened. The Garden of Eden was actually not at all about what the Christian church tries to make it about. It was actually
Really?
about God worship. And the whole story of Eve biting from the fruit goes back to the story of goddess worship. And going back to trying to take from the story of old goddess veneration, and they're not wanting to go that way, essentially.
Yeah.
And I remember reading the book when God was a woman, and that changed my life. That was given to me by a friend when I was, I think, 19 or 20. And when I read that book, it completely changed my life. And just seeing how society has completely shifted and changed all these narratives and all these stories to fit the Roman Catholic Church's narrative just blew me away.
So
and
you've been bathed in this for years.
Yes.
I mean, this is clearly your calling. And when I got back from Sedona last year and heard your 2-hour lecture, I told people, she's 23 years old and she's already wise. You've already got a lot of esoteric wisdom, information, and understanding of these things. And it seems like it needed that voice. I mean, Scott does his part, Tim does his part. It seems like it needed literally a feminine manifestation to kind of speak for thousands of years and try to wrap that stuff together and show us it's all a thread and it's just a part of, of human nature and human culture to venerate the female, right?
Well, you know what, George, it's really important. And, when you think about this conference and talking about the Atlanteans and about the Younger Dryas impact and what, really what this is all about. And it's important to get our heads around it because it was a critical point in history. But the other thing that I think is really important, especially in this day and age, and especially with the political spectrum that we have right now, this fundamentalist Christian, nationalism that's coming up that really has nothing to do with what our founding fathers intended. And the understanding of the dualism and the balance between the male and feminine aspects of the Godhead is so vitally important. And how old it is and how far back it goes. We know it goes back to Egypt and beyond, to the Atlanteans. And so the things that Hayley is talking about and why this Atlantean culture prior to this catastrophic event was so successful, we think was in part due to their ideology and the respect of the male and feminine aspects, not just of deity, but of men and women of all races, colors, creeds in their societies around the world at that time.
Well, and part of the reason that we know that civilizations were really successful, and looking back at the archaeological record, even going back a few thousand years, we can see a turn point in how civilizations operated and seeing them become more violent and aggressive, because we see that shift from when women were in government power positions to having men in government power positions making these decisions. When we had women in power, there was a lot more peace, and there wasn't as much war, there wasn't as much violence, there was much more peace.
You mean machoism?
Yes, yes. And so even organizations.
I'll give you an interesting insight that is kind of obscure. I don't even know if Beckett's caught it yet, but are y'all aware that there was a genetic, we're kind of reverse engineering through time study where they can tell, look at the genes today and tell how they were moving around back in the day. And one of the things they determined was right around the time of the Younger Dryas, women outnumbered men by like 15-1.
What?
Yeah,
no, I did not know
I'll
that.
send it to you. I don't mean to drop that on you right here because you're like,
wait.
What?
Okay, so
and this is mainstream too. This is them saying,
okay,
put the graph up. Yeah.
This isn't some obscure theory that okay.
No.
So what you're saying is that prior to the Younger Dryas impact, going back to the time of the Atlantean culture, that some people are suggesting that there was a ratio of 15-1 women to men.
Yeah. No,
and so
absolute hard genetics show it. I'll find it here.
Well,
Antonio Zamora did a good video on it. I did a blog on it. If I knew I was going to bring it up, I would have teed up something, and we'll certainly put it in the a link in the notes.
Are you familiar with Parthenogenesis, George?
With what Genesis?
Parthenogenesis?
No, I'm not. What is that?
So I wrote a little bit about it, but it's actually where a female organism can actually reproduce completely on its own, not asexually.
Oh, okay.
On its
Oh,
own.
hermaphroditic.
No, it's actually female, but can reproduce at will. Now, this has only been seen in small organisms, and I'm trying to think of some examples.
Yeah.
A long time ago, but and there was a theory I was writing about this and proposed in my book that at one point in time in human evolution, potentially, maybe at some point when there was a catastrophic event, maybe humans were able to do this. And maybe we'd be able to do this again if we needed to.
Well, if we're talking about women having this ability,
yes.
And
something was going on. I just got it up now. It was 17-1.
Okay, well, if we have a ratio of 17-1, how is the race going to procreate unless? I mean, it suggests that maybe they did have this ability, that women had this ability to procreate without us.
Yeah,
and it would be definitely something that is an adaptive trait that they would acquire during some sort of catastrophic event.
Wow.
Well, what I'll do,
that's disappointing, isn't it?
It looks like I can share. I'll go ahead and I'm going to pop this study up just so people don't think I'm crazy and maybe tantalize them to. Oh my gosh! I'm on my wife's computer. I'm not sure if this is going to work.
That's wild. 17-1.
Yeah, I figured that was one that needed to get on your radar. It fell off of everybody's radar. Can y'all see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this a? Hold on. That's actually from my blog. Global dads decline, then plummet after younger dries comet impact. Okay. There you go.
Another interesting aspect of this.
This is dads, number of men. I guess this is a ratio of men to women, right? So there's the younger dries event.
Boom.
And then that's the drop off of men. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right? Yeah, man.
Okay, so George,
let me give the mainstream explanation. Because they never can admit there was a catastrophe, right? So innovations in transportation technology, the invention of the wheel, horse and camel, and open water sailing may have contributed to this pattern. And this isn't a mainstream thing. The wheel, the horse, camel, and open water sailing didn't come for another supposedly 8,000 years.
Oh,
so look at all the people on this paper too. How did that slip through? Open water sailing?
Yeah, but I don't think 8,000 years.
Sounds like one of
another
us.
Example that they were doing that long before that.
Oh yeah. So do I. I agree with you, Scott. And it's funny that they mentioned that because what it says that they're basically inferring that at least this collection of mainstream PhDs think that there was the wheel and open water sailing underway at the UYD, which is strange in itself. But the headline is, where were all the dads, man?
Well, maybe they weren't needed. And here's another thing that I'll throw out there real quick is another piece of evidence as to why maybe parthenogenesis might have been an adapted trait at some point in the human history timeline. Mitochondrial DNA, for whatever reason, is only passed from mother to child. When the baby is conceived, daddy's mitochondrial DNA is completely thrown out. Only the mother's mitochondrial DNA is passed on. Why is that? We still have no explanation as to why that is. For whatever reason,
because the feminine are divine.
Yeah, well, for whatever reason, the mother's
mitochondrial the cup.
The only important DNA that gets passed on there, and that's what tells the cell to do what it needs to do. And so, for at some point in human history, that was the adapted. I don't even know what I'm trying to say here.
Well, no, but I mean, it's the first time we're talking about this. Yeah. This is a new concept, and it's kind of mind-blowing, to be honest.
Hey, let's jump over to another new concept. This is my favorite little thing. And you were cool to look it over, and I want to pop it up again because we're going to go, us four. And I forgot to introduce Beckett, but people who are watching the Foxhole know that Beckett's a partner in the Cosmic Summit.
Before we do that, George, can I ask a quick question? I just want to make sure I understand the 17-1 ratio, females to males. Was that after the impact, or was that just before the impact?
It's right just before the impact, it seems.
Okay.
Which doesn't make sense. But it's so close, you can't really tell. I mean, where are the error bars?
So then after the impact, we see a drastic reduction in the overall population. But then what happened is the females became a smaller ratio and the males increased? I'm confused.
That's right.
Okay. I'd like to
Yeah.
see that paper.
Hell yeah, man. No,
Send
we'll
us the
put it on
link
for the
when we're done.
audience, and I'll send it to you personally, obviously.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think at some point we had talked about this. These four are going to go to Turkey together, right? And
Yeah.
Scott and
Yeah.
hey, this is y'all's first meeting. Ooh, they've frozen. Huh? There you are. Okay, I'm sorry. Everybody froze there for a second. But Beckett's going to be my date if we go to Turkey. Okay. And
I'm on
This will make a cute couple.
he's honored, he says. Okay. I'll carry your bags and treat you like, with respect and veneration. Okay. But here's why I want to go over
me too, George.
Yeah, I know. So, I went to Turkey this spring in April to see Gobekli Tepe and a bunch of other things that were every bit as interesting, which Gobekli Tepe obviously being the showstopper worldwide attention site right now. So you don't really think you're going to find anything new to do with Gobekli Tepe as a tourist, even if you're kind of a fake archaeologist like I am and whatnot. You're not going to turn over something new. And actually, it's funny. I'm about to tell you the real story, but Johanna James, who is the MC of the Cosmic Summit, and I look forward to introducing you to, Hayley.
They are going to get along like you can't believe. I know it.
They really are. They really are. It's going to be cool. So Johanna was there after we were there, and she found a new T-pillar in somebody's backyard.
What?
No one had ever. Yes. And they were like having tea. And she found the top of a pillar, and and then the locals said, yes. And the tour director, everybody got excited. They were excited.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was at one of the other T-pillar sites. I forget which one. But it wasn't Karahan because that doesn't have anybody's backyard that close. I've been meaning to ask her exactly which one it is, but it was a hell of a day. And then she actually saw a shootout in the same day.
Is she going to talk about it at the conference?
Yeah. She's definitely, I hadn't thought about that. She's got to include it. But my premise here was you don't discover something new generally as a tourist. She did. And then I did too, because I took a tip from a buddy of mine. Some of the listeners are familiar with guy Malcolm Bendall, AKA the shaman. And he had been doing, which actually I did a whole lot in my former job. And I get it. It sounds rinky dink, but he had been searching on Google Earth for curious quarries. It's a strange thing, but you can do that from the air. That's the best way to do it. You're better off with Google Earth than you are with being there, really, to just go through. And he wanted to see, I don't know why he had this feeling, but he thought that that there was a prehistoric quarry usage which wasn't being acknowledged. Okay, so he is a little bit obsessive. He sent me dozens and dozens of photos of places to go see while I'm in Turkey. And I said, well, Malcolm, man, I'm with 23 other people or something. I can't just go gallivanting around to these. Some of them look near our sites. And I said, but there's one that's really close to Gobekli Tepe. And he goes, well, mate, that's the one. And I was like, yeah, how about we just stick to that? Some other time we'll get to the other dozen places you found. But this is interesting as hell. Okay?
Yeah.
Because it didn't, and I've spent my whole career was spent looking at aerial photographs of every kind, and LiDAR and all of that, just coincidentally. It's what we did in wetland mitigation. So I looked at it, I said, that is an unusual quarry. And let me pop it up for the screen for people now. Come on.
Yeah, and while you're finding that,
please.
I found the T-pillar that Johanna found as well.
Yeah, play that while I get this up. I thought I had it teed up. Oh, I gotta hit that. Do you want to play that first? Because
yeah, that's been worked.
I can't see it on my end, but can y'all?
Yeah.
Can you guys see this video? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't.
That's a standing stone.
And she was just walking. I think she just saw it in somebody's front or backyard when she was walking through Turkey.
Well, she was observing.
Look, it's got the hands on it. That's what tipped her off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can you Does she pull back a little bit so we can see the whole thing?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
piece
so.
on the left, did that get knocked off the top?
I'm
I don't
not
know the
sure. Well,
details.
here's the
Oh, it
full.
doesn't look like it. Wow. That piece right
This is
there.
the
That seems
full
like it was
thing.
part of it. But... Wow.
Isn't that
That's
wild? And you know what? And she's over there as the most curious kind of person in the world looking for this stuff. Probably more curious than the people with all the credentials. But I mean, she deserved to find that. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, are those the hands right there? Like the fingers?
They come down
Right
like
there.
that.
Right there.
Yeah. Actually, first time I met Graham Hancock, I came up to him and I had my hands down like that. And he didn't get the joke and thought I looked like an idiot. But then I said, oh, I'm just being. Yeah. The Sumerians do that too.
Wow.
Okay.
That is cool.
Are you familiar at all with Andrew Collins and his work?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he's good friends with my best friend Helena, and I know he's been doing a ton of work at Karahan Tepe and Gobekli Tepe, and he is one of the leading researchers on that. And he was looking at a potential alignment, I think, to the Milky Way and the guy that has the penis, the statue with the penis.
Yeah.
Is that Karahan Tepe I'm thinking of?
Yeah, Karahan, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that might be a fertility site that has an alignment actually to the Milky Way.
Yeah, I actually heard Andrew speak at that at Megalithomania in November when I was in London. And, I invited him to speak, and I've sent him an email to speak at the summit, and I hadn't heard back. But I hadn't been pressing it because this is a delicate balance as you add people. I don't want to get people in the weeds, but you just, when you're getting towards the last few people, you got to be careful. You can't put out more invites than you can fulfill. So he didn't answer. I moved on to other people. But now I think I might be able to add Andrew. So I might hit you up.
Well, you know what?
Haley
Can contact
I'll
to
shoot him a
get
text.
through.
I'm in a group chat with him and Helena. I'll just shoot him a message. I'm in contact with him on a
because he's such a strong old hand at this stuff. Obviously he'd fit terrific at the summit. Not original cast, but he's a huge name and a real gentleman and a scholar. We'd love to have him.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what did I discover when I was over there? Malcolm was looking at these quarries, and we decided to go to the one, or I would try to get to the one at Gobekli Tepe. And here it is. Okay?
Yes.
So, that's Gobekli Tepe. See, dead center right there. You can see that roof. And then 2 miles away, on the next most prominent hill, and if this hill was a little bit taller from Gobekli Tepe side, this one almost covers it up. Right? You almost can't see this hill, but you can just barely see that hill. I don't want to hit the money shots quite yet. Here you go again. Okay, that's it from above. And that's what Malcolm recognized. That's a very strange quarry. Because they dug it from the top, he said. And it's also got a number of features that just suggest habitation, like walls.
Yeah.
And they tend to be aligned. There's Gobekli Tepe. See where it is on the bottom right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There it is again. That's a good picture of it. Look how strange
George,
that is. Yes, sir.
Is this site a geographic high spot?
Yeah.
It looks like it.
Now, you look off the back of it, and you own all of Anatolia. It's the most gorgeous view. You'll see it here in a minute. Okay, let's see. Here's some drone video. That'll start playing in a second. Can y'all see that?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's loading.
So actually, that is the last hill. When you look out, or last major hill, you look out and you can see 100 miles.
Wow.
Okay, now people are saying, okay, that doesn't seem like much of a discovery, George. Okay, so yeah, there's some a quarry that looks like people left stairs in it and doorways and whatnot.
George, I'm not sure that I think that's a quarry, because if they were just mining the rock for whatever, for building stone or whatever, this looks like a habitation site to me. And they may have quarried the rock and repurposed it and used it for building, but this doesn't look like a quarry to me.
I agree,
I
Scott.
think this is a habitation site, but I think there's more going on there than even just that.
Well, I'll tell you, here's some other things that kind of that cause me to wonder what the hell is going on with this place. One is, where is the where's the castle they built with all the stone? And it might be out there. It's nowhere nearby. I know that. There's certainly some castles in Shenlerfa, the major city there. But okay, just so y'all can see, look at all the strange features. Why do you dig that and that?
Right.
Why do you take out these why do you leave that block? And then, folks, as you can see, look, Scott, this is your kind of thing. That's all fill, man. Who knows how deep that goes?
Well,
it
looks like fill.
Yeah, it's just fill.
Has any archaeology been done here at all?
No. And I think that's kind of creepy too. Right?
Well,
one guy did a LiDAR survey of it. One person about 8 years ago, and I tried to contact him and got no response. But here's where it gets interesting, folks. Then, Kyle, I come back from Turkey, and I'd gone over there that day. Well, first we went on a little reconnaissance trip, then we went back with everybody. And Kyle Allen of the Snake Brothers, our friends down in Texas and speakers at the summit, he had walked to a different part of the quarry. I had seen a part where there were some etchings and marks on stone that I thought were interesting. He had gone a little deeper down the hill and found an incredible place that had all sorts of marks on it. And that included Templar symbols.
Yes.
This is on the wall there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's Templar graffiti. This one looks like it might even be a flower of life. I mean, this one definitely is.
I want to go. Yeah, man, I still hadn't gotten an iPhone 15 to go scan the damn thing properly because they just come out. But here, we'll play this video. Okay. Then I become amateur Templar researcher. Well, first, it blew my mind because I just met you, right?
Yeah.
And I just met you, and I was just starting to read all the Templar stuff and really bone up on it. And then found this. I said, my God, I don't remember there being what is the connection between Gobekli Tepe at 10,000, 12,000 years ago, and the Templars, which go back roughly 1,000 years, right? What the hell were they doing camped out, leaving marks? It looks to me like over time, you can still see that, correct?
Well, yes. And what
it's
this
not
looks
showing
like,
anything.
Tim and I have talked about this. The Templars were definitely there. This is the same kind of graffiti that you see here, that you see in Egypt at some of the important places that they went to round up this material that the Atlanteans had left for them. And I think there's some kind of a story similar going on right here. Now, exactly what it is, we don't know for sure, but they were there for a reason, and they spent time there. And, they obviously performed rituals, but there was something of great importance, something of value that was there that they wanted, that they apparently got.
Exactly. So what I did, and I was like, well, let me go ahead and just Google Urfa, which was the city's ancient name, Edessa, Urfa, San Lurfia. Okay, it's had a number of names. And so I said, what could it have had some role with the Templars? Because I thought they just hightailed it down to Jerusalem, and you knew all this stuff. But no, in the First Crusade, they made one huge major detour. Can y'all see that?
Yeah. Edessa.
And they went to Edessa, which is where Gobekli Tepe is. So why? And did they go over there? And why they carved their names in there?
We know that they went there because they were, like I said, rounding up information, technology, history, artifacts, documents. There was all kinds of things that were left for them, that they knew what they were looking for. This whole notion that, the Templars' mission was to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land is nonsense, that they were the fighting force of the Christian church. That's what they wanted people to believe, but they had their own agenda. They had their own mission. And that's really the story that we're now telling. But exactly
as I got into it, I found out apparently that's where the shroud came from too. It was the cloth of Edessa.
The Shroud of Turin?
Yeah, the shroud has a plausible connection to Edessa. Edessa venerated a shroud that was the the crucifixion shroud of Jesus. And then it disappears for like 300 or 400 years, and then it pops back up in France.
Well, the Shroud of Turin, and Tim is the one that can talk about this with firsthand knowledge, but what he talks about is the shroud is old, and a lot of people get excited about it, but the image on it is not that old. The image, according to Tim, was created by Leonardo da Vinci around 1500 in a broker deal with the Roman Catholic Church, that if da Vinci created a relic for them that they could use to passivate their flock and to
incite belief.
Yeah.
Well, to use to gain followers. That was in return for laying off the scientists and not persecuting the people that were doing the scientific work that would eventually lead to the Enlightenment age. And that image was created using German lenses, mirror lenses, and camera obscura. And according to Tim, this work was done inside the bowels of the Vatican. They used a dead body for the body part, but the head supposedly is that of Da Vinci.
That is fascinating. I wish you were on here. I'm not wedded to any of this, and I'll listen. Tim's done more research than I have. Let's just try to find
when you look up Leonardo da Vinci in his older days, and then you look at a picture of the Shroud of Turin and the face on there, the faces look very similar.
Yep.
Hold on, I want to make y'all, if y'all don't know about that part about the Shroud of Edessa, though, the image of Edessa. I am sharing that now.
Okay.
So that reaches a long way back, man, that they had that shroud, links with the Shroud of Turin. I mean, there's no doubt that they held a shroud that depicted Jesus as well. Whether it is the same one that ended up in Turin is another matter.
Well, that looks like a smaller shroud.
There's a lot.
It has the head, but that's just an artist's rendition.
Yeah.
It's probably not accurate to what the real one was.
Hey,
that's
tell me about the Cremona Documents, man. I buried my lead again. And I know it made sense for you to give us kind of the deep background on it, and I appreciate that. But because it's more your modern story. It's all Scott.
Well, it's basically I met this guy Don Rue at a NERA conference, New England Antiquities Research Association, back in 2006 is when I first met Don. But it was in 2008 when we really started. He approached me about helping him try to understand some of these documents and things that were going on in the field that he and his best friend, who was deceased in 2000, had hiked up into the mountains in the Catskill Mountains and found a site that had carvings and caves, and they believe was the remains of a temple that dates back over 2,000 years. In any case, Don shared information with me. And
is that a known site, Scott, or is that still a quiet site?
Well, we don't want a lot of people going up there because all it takes is one jackwagon to destroy something. And frankly, that's happened a number of times with sites and artifacts that we did episodes on with America on Earth. Probably the most.
Yeah, but this wasn't a state park.
No, this is in state land. It is state land.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Anyway,
it's not tourist site.
So anyway, the story is that Don, his best friend, they worked for a private security company that did work for our military. And that in itself is an amazing story. But in 1968, these guys went scuba diving off an island in the Hudson River called Bannerman Island. Francis Bannerman was an arms dealer. He and his son, the father sold weapons to both sides in the Civil War, and then eventually the son would also sell arms to any buyer that came along. And he got in a little bit of trouble leading up to World War I. And then he died around 1916, and the place fell into disrepair, but there were munitions that were still stored on the island that eventually blew up in the late 50s and blew all these munitions into the water. Now, Don and Bill and these other guys that were part of this agency, in the summertime, they would go up there and scuba dive off the island looking for these munitions they could take back and pawn for money, right? And while they were there, Don found a box that had been blown off the island from the flower gardens, and inside they found a bronze disc or a brass disc, I should say, and then a clay tube sealed on both ends with beeswax. And inside there were a couple of scrolls that were written in an ancient alphabet called Theban, which is a known alphabet that the Templars used. In any case, this led to Bill, and what happened was this decorative ornament he gave to Bill because Bill's wife was a gardener and Don thought that she could use it. And anyway, this led Bill on a mission to Rome, where he purchased a document that we now call the Cremona document. The reason we call it that is because the document spent time in a church in Italy, in Cremona, Italy, and that's why we came up with that name. Bill called it something else, but we renamed it here about 10 years ago. In any case, Bill purchased this document, and we now know what it was a compilation of Templar records that included many encrypted messages that talked about historical events that happened in Templar history. There are many maps about their explorations around the world, including North America. There are letters and artifacts that go with this thing. But in 2008, Don had received this material that he had at the time from the estate of Bill Jackson. Bill left it for Don. It also included some books that had secret messages and maps that were hidden inside some of these
So one
books.
elderly agent left another less elderly agent the documents. Yes. Then that man became very old, and then he passed them to you?
Well, no. What's happened is we've been working together trying to understand what these documents are.
He's still in the
coding some of these encrypted documents and trying to understand what the hell the story is. But what has happened since 2017 is we thought Bill had sold the majority of the document to the Vatican because he said he sold it in 1994 when he knew that he was going to be dying because he had Parkinson's disease and arterial sclerosis. And Bill was a medical doctor. And so what we found out in 2017 is that it turns out that Bill pulled out of the document that he sold to the Vatican the most important parts. And he disseminated them to his colleagues in the agency with strict instructions upon their deaths that this material go to Don Rue. And in one of the letters in one of these caches, there's a letter where Bill explains exactly what he did to the person that he left it to. And he talks about Don being his best friend and the only one that took his research seriously in the years before 1994, from 1971 to 1994. And so in the last 6 years, 5 of those colleagues have passed on, leaving documents for us to decipher, to try to understand, and maps. Haley's been with us. She's seen these. She's opened some of these boxes, and it's just incredible. But what is the most incredible part of this is in the past year, we came to realize, because I asked Don at one point about a year and a half ago, I said, Don, is there anybody left? Or are we done? Are we not going to get any more packages? He said, well, I don't think Bill would have left anything with the one guy that was still living. But he sat and he thought for a second and he goes, Bill had a girlfriend. Well, we eventually tracked her down after 6 months. It turns
Down in
out
South Carolina, didn't you?
the girlfriend had passed away, but she bequeathed this stuff to her cousin. Her name is Roberta. And Roberta had material. And last year, starting in January,
incredible.
we got 6 encrypted messages. 4 of these encrypted messages are almost exclusively about the activities that happened on Oak Island. And so there was so much material that we just had to write a book about it. And we have another book that's coming out about the collective of everything that's going to be a massive volume. But the first thing we wanted to do was come out with the Oak Island book and share the details about what happened while the show was still airing. I mean, every week it's going to be a commercial for the book, right? So that's why we're coming out with that one first. But the information that's in there is germane to the entire story. And you see that skull that's on the cover of the book? The reason it's there is because not only did the Templars leave treasures and jewels, they also left artifacts and relics. And in this case, that skull was left at Oak Island for a short time. Now, the question is, whose skull is it? And, where did it come from? Well, that
Scott,
would be
did I see the book is just now published? Or no, February 20th.
It's being published right now. We will have books in about 30 to 45 days.
Are there things that after it's published you would come back and talk about, or do you kind of talking about everything in the book now?
I'm going to talk about it in the at the summit. I will talk a little bit about this. But what's really cool is, well, there's so much information in these documents that are going to be in the book. But I tell the reader at some point, there's a certain amount of material that we have redacted. You will see the drawings, you will see the maps, but they're going to be covered up. We're going to tease people because we're not going to give this content to the Curse of Oak Island so they can take it. I mean, once it's published, it's out in the public domain, right? We don't want to give them all this content and have them make millions of dollars without getting something in return, right?
I think, hey, man, I like your forthrightness. Yeah, you did the legwork. Yeah.
You know what we are going to do?
What?
We're going to share some of that information at the Cosmic Summit.
Hell yeah, brother. That gets even better. Thank you, man.
Hey, we're going to do that, but you know what?
Yeah.
It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you a cold one, brother.
It's going to cost a cold one. And I tell you, folks, that's a good time to mention how special kind of the Templar gang is going to be at the summit. If people are not aware, the conference is set up for 2 days of speakers, and that'll be main stage speakers and then 2 big breakout rooms. And we'll probably have 25 speakers those 2 days, and that's Saturday and Sunday, the 14th, the 15th and 16th. Then, and Scott and Haley are going to speak it over the weekend. But then on Monday, we have 4 classrooms, lecture halls, if you will. Okay, and I'm calling it Classroom Day because the idea is you can buy a second ticket. The first ticket's plenty fine. You can have a blast, be just like last year. We'll have the big party on Friday night, 2 days of speakers. You might want to get out of there. But if you're a super fan of either Scott's work, Randall's work, Malcolm Bendall's work, we're going to be bringing him in with the machine to test it live in Greensboro. And then UFOs. We're going to do a room on UFOs just because it's so damned interesting and we got some connections there. But the point here with Scott is this is a complex. What the
lecture halls look like.
I always say that to you, Scott, and it's not fair because when you're in the middle of something, it doesn't seem as complex as it is. And you say, well, just read the books. You'll get it. But it is kind of complex, that it's multi-layered, and it lends itself to long-form presentation. And I mean several hours. So you and Haley and Tim Hogan and anybody else you want to bring along, have that whole day, call it 9 to 5 or 9 to 4 or whatever, to
that's
take 200 people on a deep dive.
that's when we're going to reveal the stuff that's been redacted. They're going to have to come to that Monday presentation. We're not just going to give it away for free at the regular presentation. You got to come to the breakout session, and then you're going to get the good stuff.
No, it's treetops. It's 101. Yeah. Haley, he said you looked in one of those boxes. Did you open up some treasure with Scott? Did you look in there? What was that like? What was it like? Tell me about that day. What
Which one? What do you mean?
I don't know, but like, was there a box? Was it like, be careful with that, you dumbass, you're going to break it? I mean,
George, I'm telling you, this has been one treasure hunt after another, and I'm not lying. We have literally gone and
God, that's so cool.
Literally rented random pieces of random boats to boat across bodies of
paddle
water,
across
to get to remote islands to dig, and we were doing this on the down low. We're hiding because there's the game warden going by. We're trying not to get caught, right? This has been crazy stuff. And
this is real deal stuff, and it's not just some cache of Spanish coins or Civil War treasure. Hell, it's some of the most important information in all of human history.
Briefly, I'll tell you a quick story. One time we were out looking for what we thought might be what was said to be the bloodline of his ancestors, whatever that meant in the Cremona document. Piece of the true cross. This is what we thought we were looking for, and this could have been the Holy Grail, right? We found something. This is when we're out here with this metal detector.
Don't tell them what it was, though.
I'm not. So we're out here, and
serious.
Seriously,
Beckett, go ahead and go dark on the recording. We're going to get it out of it.
Okay. The breakout session.
We'll wait to June.
We're out here looking for this with the metal detector. We're paranoid as shit because it's like the game warden's going by. It's a holiday weekend. We're not supposed to be on this island, and we had paddled out here, and it was just crazy. And the thing's beeping like you wouldn't believe. We find something, we pull it out of the ground, and we're looking at each other, and we're like, if this is the Holy Grail, we can't be opening it here on the island. We gotta get back.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, no, we're not making this up. I nearly shit myself, but I got to tell you, when in those movies where they're digging, that happened.
It's on video. We do have it.
We're not making it up, but we're not going to say what
happened.
Where
was the island in general? Where were you?
It was
hemisphere.
It was in
continent.
Let's say in the northeast. In the northeast. Yes.
Huh.
Okay. And
I was shocked that you had done you'd done work here in North Carolina in the Cape Fear River with a family that I knew.
That was another treasure hunt where
There's
we
nothing
found
cooler than
you mean right here,
in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's a little south of me now, but I've spent a lot of my life down there. And the Cape Fear River.
It was used to pay Marquis de Lafayette for his service during the Revolution.
Damn, that's cool.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yep. And that coin, well, the funny part was when we went on that treasure hunt and we found the coin, about a year later, when Dan Spartan died, we got another box. And in that box, there was a giant map that had been recopied from an animal skin. It was rotting away. Mm-hmm. But one of the pieces of information that was on that map that had 13 parts was information about that treasure. And it told us it had been recovered in 1794.
Yeah, somebody beat you to it. Yeah.
Well, they recovered it and they paid Lafayette, so he got paid for his service.
Wow. I'll be damned, man.
So since last June at the summit, how many treasure hunts have you been on, and how many more are you going to do before next June?
Well, we went on one in September. Remember with Don?
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, that was a big one
for a certain relic, which we can't.
I want to go.
Yeah.
That was a big one, and that involved taking a float plane into a secluded island way the hell up in the middle of nowhere.
I had to rent a float plane because there's no roads to this location.
This is how we spent my birthday in September.
That's right.
Sounds like a fun birthday.
That was fun, and I will tell you this: we have one more treasure hunt to go on for sure, but we got to wait until the snow melts. It's up in the Adirondacks, and it's way the hell.
I just love it, and again, I got to say it again. It's not just some old treasure. it's very important knowledge. It's almost the knowledge is almost cooler than that thought that you might find some gold or some trinkets. You know what I mean? It's
Okay,
not.
so let me ask you a question. Let's just say a hypothetical. Let's get crazy for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Let's say you had the remains of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And let's say the Templars had them, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you were a treasure hunter, what would you rather find? A chest full of gold or the remains of Jesus?
Oh,
And
no
what would
question.
be more valuable?
No question, the latter.
I mean, do you think the church would maybe give you 100 chests of gold for that relic?
Well, that just totally.
Yeah, obviously there'd be ways to monetize it, but I if as long as you're not starving and your family's not hurting, I'd rather have knowledge than a little bit more money.
Yeah, I'm with you.
When you get down to it,
you can't take money with you.
Now, it might depend what is the knowledge versus the money. If it's relatively insignificant knowledge versus a whole fucking lot of money, that's another matter. Yeah, so there's a certain equation there.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Well, obviously,
Hayley,
this is not insignificant knowledge. I mean, Scott and Hayley, finding all of this treasure, and let's say you find the remains of Jesus Christ, what do you hope comes from this for people and in the world with this knowledge?
I'll let Hayley go first.
Enlightenment, truth. Honestly, what we want to share with the world is the truth. We just want that to be shared with everybody because the church, and I hate to say this, but the church has been trying to suppress the truth for so long, and it's time that the truth be put out there.
Did you grow up Roman Catholic, Hayley? Did you grow up Catholic? Okay. Yep. And Scott, I know you did, right?
My dad was a Freemason, and I didn't find out my dad was a Freemason until the day after he died when they gave me his ring. But I think Hayley summed it up perfectly. And, I don't want to get political here because both sides are guilty of corrupting the truth.
You can be political.
Now more than ever in our politics, it's like who knows what to believe. And with AI and, news used to be just news. Now it's all opinion. And I feel like things are spiraling out of control. And again, as a Freemason, I think it's important that people understand that our country was founded by Freemasons and that under the tenets of Freemasonry. Make no mistake about it. 53 of the 56 signers of the Declaration were Master Masons. They were also Knights Templar. They just didn't tell anyone about it. So what is bothersome to me is how there's just we're not being told the truth about anything really anymore these days, and the truth is the only way to go forward intelligently. And the old adage about history: you can't go forward into the future intelligently unless you know where you've already been.
I did want to sorry to interrupt you. I
no, it's okay.
Add one thing too about the current Pope. He did say something in a video recently. Where he did say that in the Bible it talks about following. There will be a time when you realize that you're following the false church, and he says that if you follow me, the Pope said this there was a TikTok video I saw of this.
It's like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
it wasn't long ago.
He said, if you follow me, you are following the false church.
Wow.
Really?
For the Pope to say.
Okay, now I just want to say one thing. I said this 13 years ago. I wrote about it in my book. And I said, when he first came out on the balcony after he was selected the Pope, he made a hand gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, you'll see it. And when I saw that hand gesture, I told everybody, and I wrote about it in my book. I said, this guy is on the squad. He's a brother. He's going to be different. You watch. He's going to be
in a good way.
Any Pope we've ever had. And
he also just recently the church is woman.
Yes.
He's saying all these very radical things for a Pope. And I mean, he's talking about how the women need to be involved in the church too. And he's really pushing the envelope.
And not just that. We have to remember And this goes back to the Younger Dryas and this whole history that we talk about with the Atlanteans all the way up to the Templars and Freemasonry and to us today. It's all part of this processional cycle, right? Mm-hmm. And what's happening right now is we are transitioning. We are at the transition point from the age of Pisces the fish to Aquarius, the feminine water bear. And the symbol is two rivers that flow together as one. And this is a very important time of understanding of truth, of understanding the sacred feminine, because without balance, we're doomed. And so the work that Hayley's doing, the work that you're doing, George, the work that we're all doing is vitally important to bring the truth forward as we go through this vitally important time in, in astronomy, astrology, all of it. The cosmology of people is really just now being fully understood. So,
and I think people are much more open to it than they were in the past.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's
why my kooky subjects, now people aren't well versed in it necessarily, but they're much more open than they used to be.
And that's why the Cosmic Summit is so important. And I have to say, and I'm not just blowing sunshine up your rear end, George, last year's conference, which was your first one, right? It was the maiden voyage of the Cosmic Summit, was arguably one of the most well-organized, amazing speakers. It was scientific, but yet it was fun. It was open. And I have to say, I was very, very impressed with what happened.
Well, that means a lot coming from you. You're a real pro and have seen a lot of those kind of shows, and we're just happy to
I'm being totally
be
honest.
a part of the mix of this.
Hayley's going to have a great time, and we're going to have a great time. So I can't wait.
Well, listen, I want to close with just a couple of things to point people to where y'all are, because I didn't mention it right off the bat. You got a new book coming out, but right now you've got, I've only watched 5 parts. Are there 5 parts or are there more on the Gaia series?
Of the Mysteries of the Night.
Mysteries of the Night. There are 10.
It premiered a month ago. They aired the first 2 episodes, then every Monday for the next 8 weeks, and we're now into episode 5. Episode 6 premieres tomorrow, so and they just keep getting better and better as far as I'm concerned. And
Pam and I have watched all 5. And it's absolutely fantastic, folks. It is not a bunch of superfluage, and pretty pictures and stuff. It is Scott and Tim giving the whole damn story as they know it. And I'm glad it's 10 episodes. I was like, God, it isn't done yet, because you feel like you know a lot by 5, right? Yeah. I can't imagine what's to come.
Hey, one thing I do want to tell you, I did just get a text from Tim. He had a family emergency and he apologized profusely.
Oh, that's fine, man.
And
anyway, we're informal here at the Foxhole. It gives me another good reason to maybe I'll get him on just him one day.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be great.
He's certainly worthy. Yeah.
Yeah. Hayley has something she wants to share too.
Oh,
well, hold on. Let me go to. But you do tours, so I want you to tell us about your tours. Is that what you? I wasn't going to forget. Now, people forget about my show when they go on other shows, but I don't forget about people's shows when I'm on my show.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I just got a brand new website this week up and running. And
nice.
So
I think I saw it.
It's HayleyARamsey.com.
Hell yeah.
So pretty easy to remember. And so you can buy a signed copy of my book. You can book tours. You can see all my events, which I'm going to have the Cosmic Summit added to that pretty soon.
Yes.
All in one place on there. And so you can also see pictures from travel, and I'll be putting blog posts up for travel recommendations and that sort of thing also. So everything in one place. And Scott and I will be doing a Spain and Portugal tour in May. We'll be doing, at the end of June, we'll be doing a Templar and Arthurian tour in Scotland. And we'll be doing an Orkney tour where we're visiting a lot of megalithic sites like the Stones of Steness, the Ring of Brodgar.
There you go.
We'll be doing, of course, whiskey tasting, because we can't be in Scotland and not do that. We'll be visiting Clava Cairns and Inverness. We'll be doing, of course,
the site looks
an Outlander tour as well.
Yes,
and we're going to
be
a France trip in October.
And then
are those tours
go over to Odessa and Gobekli Tepe and Templar Tepe.
And Templar Tepe, yes.
Are we going to put that on it seriously? You want to do it next year or do it later this year?
Yeah, we'd love to.
Okay.
Hell
Okay,
yeah.
hey, but Hayley, so you still got places. Where are you trying to fill people up right now? What
So
would be
we still have the Path of Initiation for Spain and Portugal, and Quest for the Holy Grail in Scotland. We still have spots on those trips, as well as Orkney, and then also in France. We still have spots available on those.
So I know you're doing one of them immediately preceding the Cosmic Summit. Like you're going to fly from Scotland to Greensboro and then fly back.
Literally.
The Quest for the Holy Grail trip, the one that you just showed before, that one is the one that borders up to, or no, the Outlander one is the one that borders right up, but that's sold out. So that one is the one that borders up to.
I was going to say somebody could get a spot and just completely geek out for God knows how long that would be, you know, and go directly from one of your tours to the Cosmic Summit. That'd be something else. Maybe we could do a combo package next year.
That would be really fun, actually. It would be a blast to do that if we could. But I think it's probably for the best. They won't be exhausted and they won't get too tired of me. It'll be nice and fresh, and they won't get tired of Scott and I. We won't be talking their ears off, at least. But
y'all are delightful.
But it'll be a blast. Looking forward to it.
Well, y'all generous with your time during the weekend. Thank you very, very much. We've got a lot to learn from you, and that is true. You're doing some of the most amazing, coolest work on Earth, and I'm just proud to know you, and even more proud to have you coming to our event in Greensboro in June. So,
well, we're excited, and thank you for having us today. And make sure you get Tim. I hope wasn't anything too serious, but he does a great job. I know you'll have fun with him too.
Yeah, I will reach out to him, and no problem that he was unable to make it understand entirely. Thank you very, very much. Becky, any closing words? Anything we're forgetting? We're having a town hall kind of February 16th.
If there's anywhere else that you want them to find you, Scott or Hayley, we got your website pulled up. Do you guys have social media accounts that you want to mention?
Well, I've got my HookDex website. If people are interested in getting a signed book, just go to hookdex.com, HOOKEDX.com. I also have a blog. If people want to, punch me out on one of our episodes or our research, go ahead and go to scottwolteranswers.blogspot.com. And anybody that, posts on there, I'll respond. So
okay, cool, man.
So cool. There you go.
Well, thank you both very much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thanks for having us, George.
Okay. Bye, gang.